Hello, future real estate agents. Actually, also current agents, members of the public, and anybody within eye or earshot of this episode or of this podcast slash video. So I have been asked to record or to give my take, if you will, on the most recent NAR settlement. NAR is a National Association of Realtors. The settlement occurred approximately 1 week ago. So I wanted the dust to settle and wanted to put out my thoughts about this. The platform that I'm recording this on, or the show that I'm recording it on, is called the AHA Real Estate Exam Prep. And I wanted to address that real quickly because the show typically is designed, or generally almost every episode is designed to help people that are going through to become a licensed real estate agent. So they're in the pre-licensing classes and or taking the state exams, whatever they are. But because of my education, because of that platform, many people have reached out and asked me, friends, and again, agent friends of mine, just members of wherever, have asked me my take on this based upon my background, experience, and all that. So this episode is going to dive into what that is. So I just wanted to give that as a quick caveat because, again, if you're looking at this, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to it on your iTunes, it says this is a real estate exam prep thing, and it is. But today it is not. Today it is to help everybody, anybody that is interested in this topic, and my perspective on all that's happened. So that is the point of the episode today. So let's get started with the show. Hello, future real estate agents. And as I put out in the intro, anybody that is licensed, anybody that's a member of the public, just anybody that is interested in one more take on the NAR settlement. So I wanted to put this out there because, as I mentioned at the beginning, several people have asked about my opinion. So I wanted to put that out there. Again, just out of courtesy, that's not what it is, just out of the interest, because what I have seen, and as I'm going to go through today, there's been a lot of misinformation. So hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from, and maybe have a better understanding as opposed to some of the tilted information that has been out there. The settlement happened about a week ago. I'm recording this on a Saturday, a week after the settlement occurred. I'm forgive me, I can't remember the date, but it was, I think, Friday, goodness, I'm trying to think, the 13th, 14th, something like that, 15th, whatever it was. Anyway, but anyway, I'm recording this on March 23rd, just so that you have an understanding. It's about a week after that is settled. I wanted to kind of have everybody get the sensationalism out, the shock and awe of everything. And now that that's kind of squashed, people are like, okay, now I'm ready to listen instead of seeing the headlines and all that. Real quick, or not real quickly, the just to address the main highlights of what I hope that you hear in this, from all of what I'm going to go through. And this will be an in-depth discussion, or talk, I guess. I'm not discussing with anybody, just to talk. Is a couple of things that I saw that were important. First and absolutely foremost, this is my opinion, but I feel like this is very strong. I feel very strongly about this, is that this settlement is a huge detriment to the public and to buyers in particular. I'm going to dive into that a lot more, but just want to be upfront and let you know I feel very strongly, and every real estate professional, not because they've been biased in this in any way, but that this is a huge detriment, and I'll get into reasons why. Part of the reason that's a problem is that the settlement, that again I'll get into more detail, is because of the actions of a few agents. There are a few boards, there's certainly a few companies out there, but basically it's the adage that a few bad apples ruined it for everybody else. So, and I'll get into explaining the legal wranglings of that a little bit, but that was something that was an issue that I wanted to address because, again, it makes it seem like there's more to the story when there's not. There's just a few jerks out there that ruined it for the rest of us. A third thing I really want to just, I can't address as a high level umbrella type of thing, is that this settlement occurred because they wanted to, I say they, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, wanted to manage the legal wranglings in the judicial process, not because it was right, not because it was the thing to do that made sense from a standpoint of, making it right to the public. I do think NAR had some public, some culpability in all this, But at the end of the day, there's some other legal wranglings, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit more about what those were to some degree. And then the last thing that I hope you pick up out of this episode, because again, this is the most frustrating thing for me, is that the media, social media, and news outlets have just effed this up so badly, and the public, we're not better for it. Um, um, Again, I'll get more into what that is, but they have messed this up. Social media people, people that just don't quite frankly know what the hell they're talking about. So hopefully you'll understand a little bit more as we go through. So now let me get into some of that, explaining a little bit more about what I just went through. Before I do that, though, again, I want to kind of talk a little bit about my background experience, so that way you can understand why I think, and why I think a lot of people are willing to listen to me is because of the breadth of the width of my background. I am a licensed real estate instructor. I teach pre-licensing and continuing education courses all across the country to thousands of people every year. I'm also a licensed appraiser and a real estate agent. And also to top it off, it sounds like I'm building up my resume here. I'm also a law school student, which, ego in check here, makes me honestly, just being very honest, that makes me a well-rounded expert on this situation. One of the things that has been such a big issue is that so many people, a lot of people, news outlets, don't know anything about this at all. They just are going with the headlines and the main pieces without having all the understanding of the entire process. And or there are people out there that might be a real estate agent or might have some toe in the real estate realm, but they don't have the well-rounded experience. So again, I am not saying that to elevate myself, to say that I'm better than those people. It's just that the information I'm going to put out is with all of that background and experience in mind, not just I'm a real estate agent and I want to protect my interests, not that I'm a NAR representative or anything like that at all. I have a well-rounded experience to all of this. And so when I went through this, I kept all of that in mind to eliminate the bias and some of the things that have been out there. So wanted to point that out. The other thing is that the statements that I'm going to put out through here, for the most part, are the full truth. And what I say there might be a few things that I cut out, but they're the innocuous pieces, the things that really have no impact. I did not cherry pick little things of this settlement. I didn't pick out the few bullet points that I wanted you to know because I have an agenda. We'll talk more about the news and social media aspects that have done exactly that, that have not given the full story. What I have done is put together a comprehensive thing that will, quite frankly, just go through all of this. However, having said that, I will interject my opinion on some of this too, again, based upon all of my experiences and all that. A couple more pieces of transparency, just so people don't call me out and say, well, yeah, you've got this or that or the other, is that first of all, I am not a practicing real estate agent. I don't sell real estate. I have a real estate license. I have practiced in the past. I have worked as a buyer and a listing agent. Worked as a property manager, so I do have all that background. But currently, I do not sell real estate. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, and also that my wife is a real estate agent. But with that in mind, I would tell you, and this is not to I don't know, make it out to be more than what it is, that with love to my wife, I have no bias toward trying to put out information so that way she keeps her job. Basically, that if if a lot of people are concerned that because of this settlement, real estate agents are going to lose their job, I have no concern about that at all. So this podcast, this episode, this opinion that I'm going to put out here, the information has no impact on that at all. Quite frankly, if she did not sell another piece of real estate, it would not change anything for us at all. So there's none of that. The last thing about being transparent is that I used to be a member of NAR. I used to be a realtor. I am no longer that. I still teach the code of ethics. I am considered an expert. I testify in different cases and different lawsuits, just for different things. Not this particular lawsuit, but just in past court cases, I've testified on code of ethics, realtor type of things. But I am no longer a realtor. So again, I'm telling you all that because I don't want somebody to think that I have some agenda, that yeah, I'm a realtor and I want to, try to lift everybody up and, say, look over here when actually we've got this sleight of hand over there. There's none of that going on, to be very, very honest. And again, if anybody wants to call me out or whatever, I'm happy to take your discussions or whatever. Um, and I mentioned this earlier. One of the things that again I do want to point out as well is that this is a hugely misunderstood piece of the lawsuit, is that it is based upon only a few lawsuits that came out of a few states. Those few bad people that have been out there doing these things. This is not, guys. This is not the practice of the majority of agents that are out there. This lawsuit and all the things that came out of it are the outlier here. They're the ones that I mean, if I were to put a number to it, maybe 3 to 5% of the entire real estate realm or agency has taken on these illegal and bad activities, as bad behavior and all that. So it is not a systemic or any kind of a thing that this is just profoundly interspersed in the entire industry. This is just absolutely not. And that's one of the things that I've seen perpetuated by many people, that agents have been screwing people over for forever. And that is absolutely not true. Absolutely grossly mischaracterized, just grossly misunderstood. So, and then I guess the last thing I do want to put, again, just putting all these caveats up front, so that way, again, you understand some of this, is that, and many of you know this, as of today, again, a week after the settlement agreement, the agreement has not been approved yet. So it still needs to be approved. Now, everybody expects that it will be, so I can't imagine there being any changes. But if there are, then some of what I may put out here today might need to be corrected. And that's because of a change that happens after today that obviously I don't know about yet. But on top of that, once this is agreed upon, let's just say that all the rules I'm going to go through today are completely accurate and stays the same. What will happen from here is that the National Association of Realtors will have to come up with, code of ethics changes. They'll have to make changes to their policies and all that. These are the settlements that they have, that they've agreed to make these policy changes, but they still have to come up with the language. Once that language is created, then it needs to be promulgated out to all of its boards, all of its state members, all of its local real estate agents that they take this on. So this is going to take a little while to work through. But also on top of that, there's going to be a lot more clarification and a lot more movement that will take place, not because of any significant change, but absolutely, without question, I know that there will be more clarifying language that will be needed. And certainly I will have a future episode on what that is once it becomes readily available. Right now, again, we just have this general outline of the settlement without any of the details and without exactly the way that it will be promulgated out to all the members and all the associations and all that. So once that happens, then we'll have a better idea. But until that time, this is still up in the air. We don't know. Taking off on the very first subject that I really want to get into here is to understand the legal procedure. So this is more about my legal background now, and I'm not going to take a whole lot of time here, but this is something that has been of great interest to me, both as a real estate professional, as an educator, but also as an attorney in working. I'm not an attorney yet, obviously, making that clear, but just having a much better understanding of how the court system works. So, and it's important because so many people see TV shows about court related things. Certainly you have a basic understanding of it, but with no disrespect to anybody out there, you just don't know how all the court system works. There are so many steps. There are rules. In this case, there's something called the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure that have to be followed. There are strategies that that attorneys put together. So again, it's not just as easy as saying, well, NAR settled because they were guilty. That's not entirely the case. I absolutely believe that NAR has some culpability. And as I wrap up this episode, I'm going to talk about that a little bit, of where I think that they should have been doing things better. But with regard to this issue is dealing again with that small group of people that, again, small in comparison to the entire industry, that has screwed this up. I do recognize that, again, as an attorney, again, not that I'm an attorney, but I understand that an attorney has an advocacy for their clients. And part of that is to get as much money as they can. So obviously they're going to try to do things and go after the people that they can get that money. And honestly, part of it is too, is that the attorney, and especially in this case, is working on a contingency, which means that the more money they get for their client, the more money the attorney gets. Now, I'm not saying that the attorney's doing anything illegal or anything wrong, but certainly it behooves the attorney to look for every single penny, every single dime they can from every single person, which is what they did, to go after and get all the money they can for their client, which again is what they're supposed to do from an advocacy standpoint, but also it doesn't hurt the attorneys at all either. So I'm just going to leave that there. Um, uh, this is a civil action. I wrote this as in my notes here. But that in kind of working through that, saying what I just said is that as an attorney, and this is from my law school, this is what they call a civil action or a tort case specifically, which is a harm that was done to from one party to another. Is that my law professor, my tort professor, always had this expression. I can't use his accent, but he had just the most adorable accent. I hope that if he listens, which I'm sure he's not, but if he listens, I mean this with all the respect. But he said, "You don't go after people that don't have any money." And so I always love that he said that. I mean, just the way that he said it. But the fact of the matter, what he was saying there is exactly what happened in this case. Is that there are, again, I hate to keep beating the dead horse. There are players out there that have screwed this up, but they don't have any money. NAR, the National Association of Realtors, they have a ton of it, as well as some of the bigger brokerage firms. So they're going to find every little nuance, every little teeny tiny sliver of culpability, because if they can find that, then they can go after them and go after the money. So again, it's not that it's a fair thing. Again, NAR had some culpability. Do I think that they should have done some things? Absolutely. But for them to pay the lion's share of this because of what the scummy few agents have done is just sad. But that is the way that the court system works. So I can sit here and talk about how much I think about that. But again, I'm a law student. I understand that that's part of the system. So it's important to understand that just because somebody has settled doesn't mean that they're culpable. They did that because of their legal wranglings. They're trying to protect themselves. And again, the NAR president has even stated publicly that they put this case to rest for many reasons. One, so that it doesn't get drug out, so that way it squashes any of the future lawsuits that were just going to be done with this. They have this one settlement piece that they're going to pay out, which is substantial, and so that way also everybody can move on, because we need the industry to I guess heal from this, if you want to call it that, but just adapt to some of these changes, and let's move forward, because buyers and sellers still want to be market participants. There's still people that out there that want to buy and sell homes. So if we're wrapped up in this legal thing, like nobody is certain what we can do by settling this. It's like, okay, we're done. Let's move forward. So I thought that that was some responsibility that NAR took on their own, which is admirable. But again, I do want to clear that up from the standpoint that NAR had money, and that was a big piece of why they were named in this. And again, I think very honestly, they were unfairly mischaracterized in all this. But again, I understand the judicial process. The next thing I wanted to talk about real quick, and this is just more personal to me because I've seen it happen in so many cases with so many different news stories, is that I want to explain to you real quickly the news process, because a lot of people don't realize this, and you know it from a general characterization, because I mean certainly some of you may be familiar with the expression fake news, which I'm not here. That's not a political statement that I'm trying to make by any means, but just the news story, the news outlets, the social media people, and all that, they are working for one thing, and that is to get ratings, views, and clicks, because the more ratings and views and clicks they get, the more advertising dollars they get. In other words, they get more money. I have worked in media before, so I know the background. I know what they've done. And almost in every situation, with rare instance, have I seen a news outlet give the entirety of a story. They do not give a full rounded story. I've yet to see that in any of these major cases for sure, but even certainly in local cases. They have their own twist. They don't lie. I want to be clear. Maybe some of them have, certainly. I don't want to say that they none of them do, but it's not that they lie about it. It's that they give the twist. They give the shock and awe, because the more shock and awe and the headlines we can put out there, the more people click, the more people share, the more people view, which means that I can increase my advertising dollars and I make money. So it's not about giving you correct information. It's not about being transparent, saying, here's all the sides of this. If they were true news outlets that were really looking out for the public's interest and not their own, they would share the entirety of the story. They would have an expert. Me, I'd not invite myself, by the way, I would open myself to invitation, but certainly there are many other experts out there that are like me in that case that could give a full range of the information, not just the bullet points, not just the cherry pick things that we want to go through, because again, we want the headlines because we want the ratings so we can get our money. Most pathetic thing that I can't stand about the news media. So I get a little incensed about it because again, that absolutely happened here in this case, in the rush to get information out, so that way we could get that advertising dollar, we could get a ratings higher. And again, just I've seen it so many times. And in that, kind of something I'd said already is that my goal within presenting all of this information, that what I've done already and what we're going to get into next, is that this is not me. I'm not looking for clicks. I'm trying to get out information. Truly, I'm going to give you every bit of it that's out there. I'm not going to hold any punches. I'm not going to do a sleight of hand of look over here, but ignore this over there, kind of a thing. You're going to hear everything about this. That again, from what I can get, what I have dug into so far. So, just wanted to make that clear that this is not a biased perspective on it. I mean, I guess I just had a little bit of bias toward the news media, but it is based on reality. It is based on fact. So I wouldn't even call that a bias per se, that I have seen it and I know it to be true. I've seen it in the background. I see it in the forefront and all that. So again, I am getting paid nothing for this platform, even that I'm on, the AHA Real Estate Exam Prep. I actually take a loss on this thing. So I am losing money on every episode that I put out here. And I'm not saying that for anybody to feel sorry. I'm simply saying that I'm not putting this out here because I hope that I'm going to get all the clicks and the ratings and all that and make all the money. That is not what will happen. That's not what I'm looking for. There's nothing about this. I am just very passionate about the real estate industry and want the corrections that need to be made, but also to have a better understanding about the truth of the matter, what's actually happened here. The next thing that I want to get into before I dive into the actual settlement itself, so I will get there here in just a moment, but before I dive into the settlement, it is important to understand a little bit of history on all of this, so you can understand some of what's happened here and what the lawsuit's addressing and really what it kind of misses on a lot of avenues. So without going into all the history, just the main few pieces are this: that real estate commissions are not a new thing, which again, most of you are like, duh. But the structure of it has been very similar for nearly 100 years. Now, obviously, 100 years ago ish or whatever, in the early 1900s, we didn't have the internet. I mean, even news was not as prolific as it is today, with the number of news stories and websites and magazines and all that. In any town, you might have one or two newspapers, and that's even if it were a large town. If it's a small town, you probably got nothing, or just something that got shipped in from a larger city. So the point is saying that pardon me, the point is saying that is simply the fact that back in that time frame 100 years ago, it was common for a seller to reach out to an agent to say, I would like for you to sell my home. But in that situation, or rather when they did that, they would pay that listing agent obviously a fee, whatever it was. And usually it would be what we would call a quote unquote full fee. The idea being is that that agent would find a buyer. That it, again, because of the inability to put this out into the public to say, hey, I've got a yard sign here for sale, like we see it today. I can't put it on an MLS. I can't put in anything. It literally is me. I'm a one person shop, if you will, and I'm going to work to try to find a buyer. So the seller engaged with me, one agent, the listing agent, to find them a buyer, and they would pay me. So there was no buyer agency. There was nothing like that, but just it was up to that one agent. Well, over time, it was discovered, or realized, I should say rather, that that one agent probably couldn't find buyers. And certainly if they could, it didn't create any kind of demand. It didn't create any kind of a true market. So in that again, that seller would pay a commission to to the listing agent. And the listing agent then, again, 60, 70 years ago, would say that I'm going to split some of what you pay me. So I'm going to pay another agent. I'm going to have somebody else. Because again, now there's more agents that are out here. There's more of us. Again, still not able to communicate as well as we could today, but I'm going to communicate. We've got books. We have other things that I can use to get stuff out there. There's news and radio. So there's some things I can do here. So I'm going to enlist other agents to help me sell your home. And I'm going to take some of what you pay me, seller, I'm going to pay that to another agent. So hopefully I'll have a group of agents now that will help me sell your home, which again favors you, seller, will help you get your home sold and find as many buyers as we possibly can under that circumstance. The issue with that came about is that the seller had a contract with the listing agent for commission. But any agent that would find a buyer, there was no such thing as buyer agency back then. There was no such agency at all. So that agent that found the buyer had no protection for commission. Even though the listing agent said they were going to pay, they didn't always do that. So that became an issue. Again, but making clear the seller all through this time had agreed to pay the listing agent some commission, and the listing agent in this case said that I'll split it with you. Later on, something was developed because of all these issues called sub-agency that basically created an agency type of relationship where another agent, so again, kind of reframing this real quick, we have the seller still paying the same commission to that listing agent. The listing agent say, I'm willing to split that with an agent that finds me a buyer. They created, or most states created, what's called sub-agency that basically made it that we had this buyer, I'm sorry, we had this agent that found the buyer, that buyer agent, if you will. I'm using that term loosely right now, but that buyer or the agent that found that buyer was a sub-agent of the seller. So that way, in that case, the seller could pay the listing agent, and the seller ultimately would pay that buyer's broker as well, that buyer's agent, if you will. So that was the protection, that was the care there. And in that case, both of those agents, the listing agent and that buyer agent, that sub agent specifically, was compensated and represented the seller. Which the big issue there with sub agency is that the buyer had no representation at all. For those of you that have been around long enough, you've heard the expression, or maybe in other context, you've heard the Latin expression caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware. That basically it was an acknowledgement to the buyer that even though I'm an agent and I found you, we communicated, I do not represent you. I'm a sub-agent of the seller. I represent that seller, not you, buyer. So, you can buy this home, but nobody has your back. Nobody is advocating for you. You do not have an agent. So that is a big deal. And I want you to pay attention to that, because under sub-agency, that's exactly what happened, is that we had the seller paying a listing agent, and then also would pay the sub agent, which was, again, the sub agent was the agent that found the buyer here. But that sub agent, even though they found the buyer, was not the agent of the buyer. The buyer had no representation, and that the seller had an agency relationship with that sub agent. So that is a big piece, because that's going to come back here in a little bit as we work through some of the settlement. Now, in the late 90s, there was a huge, a huge issue with sub agency. And there was actually a U.S. District Court settlement out of Minnesota. If you're interested, it is Bokuski versus Adina Realty, which was a multi-million-dollar class action lawsuit back then, settled for a little less than $20 million, that basically says sub-agency sucks, which I agree. It absolutely sucks. And the reason that it sucked and why they sued and won is that the buyers were saying that, hey, this agent brought me to the table, and you're telling me that they do not represent me, that I've got to represent myself? What the heck? And I think any of you out there would agree that does not seem right. And the listing agent represents the seller. That's locked in. We understand that. That makes sense. The seller has advocacy. That listing agent takes care of them. But why? Why do we have this agent that brought this buyer? Why are they also representing the seller? And why is that buyer unrepresented? And so there was a lot of issue with that. So this lawsuit kind of started a ripple effect. It didn't have a direct impact. This didn't become a federal law by any means, but states started to recognize that, yeah, sub-agency really does suck. We need to change it. most states and all states now have essentially outlawed subagency. To some degree, I've seen some states still have it in more of a nuanced term and just how it works, but that's more of an in-house agency, which we'll talk about here in a little bit too. But that they got rid of subagency for the most part, and they created buyer agency. So now what we have is, again, still keeping track of all these commissions. The seller in the very beginning paid the listing agent. The listing agent found the buyer themselves. So the seller paid the commissions. We had sub-agency, sellers paying both agents here. So that's been the history of that. And now we have buyer agency. And with that, in the marketplace that had been in play, or the market and the way that it worked at that point, was that the seller was still paying the commission, that the seller recognized the benefit of paying a buyer agent, because when they did, again, buyer agents were incentivized, and also buyers were then more inclined to want to buy those homes because they did not have to pay a commission to their buyer agent. So again, because of the history, the way that the market has worked, and again, just the practices that has been in operation that have made sense for 100 years, when buyer agency came out, the commission structure stayed the same, except now it kind of went back to the way that it was in the early days, where the seller paid their listing agent a commission, and part of that commission was split with the buyer's agent. But the buyer's agent was now an advocate of that buyer. The buyer did have somebody holding their back, that I've got you, I've got you taken care of. I will make sure that you are covered here, that you are not left out there in the cold, that it's not caveat emptor. So that was a huge deal that happened 24, 25 years ago in most states. And I'm in Indiana. I can tell you it went through in 1999. Other states, it happened a little bit earlier, a little bit after, but it's roughly 20, 25 years for nearly every state. Buyer agency has been in place, and what we've been doing for the past, again, quarter of a decade or quarter of a century. So there's that. A couple of other things that are important to understand about history too, and this isn't really about history per se, but it ties into the conversation about all this, is that when we're talking about this, and because of these changes, we've seen agency duty changes as well. So back again in the day, we had single agency, where it was just one agent representing the seller. Then we have sub-agency, where we had two agents representing that seller. So we had kind of a two single agents representing one party and no agency representing the seller. I'm sorry, the buyer. When buyer agency came about, now we had single agency, but now we have single agency on the listing side for the seller, and we have single agency on the buyer's side representing that buyer. So that is the commonplace thing today, and that's important to recognize, because what this settlement will likely have some impact on and all that is something that has been around but has not worked very well, something called dual agency. Some states call it limited agency. In Indiana, we call it limited agency. Other states call it other things too, but it's dual agency. No matter what state you're in, the concept here is that one agent represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. So it's one agent in that case. And again, this is very important that you hear this, because this is going to come back again as this settlement, as we work through this a little bit, is that with dual agency, that neither client now, not the seller nor the buyer, has any advocacy. They don't have an agent representing them. It would be the same thing as an attorney representing opposite clients in the same thing. So, think about a divorce. The husband and wife are going through a divorce. One agent handling that, I'm sorry, one attorney handling that, that cannot happen. An attorney cannot do that. In real estate, some states do allow an agent to represent both. But when they represent both, that advocacy is out the door. I cannot get the best price for the seller and the best price for the buyer. Somebody here is going to, I say, lose. But I'm not going to get the best price for you, seller, because if I get you the best price, then that means I'm screwing over the buyer that I also represent. So in a dual agency situation, neither party has representation. Effectively, the agent becomes a facilitator, that they do not have advocacy. They cannot have advocacy. And again, you're going to hear me talk about that again as we work through here. And this is one of the other big pieces that I want you to be aware of why I know this settlement was a bad deal for many reasons. So kind of went through that. Now, the next piece that I'd like to get into is to talk about the settlement itself. So, what I have done is I have read the entirety of this settlement. If anybody's interested, I have it for you. It's 108 pages long. I know I'm a geek, but I read all 108 pages of it. I went from front to back, highlighted it, went through it, combed over it. And again, I'm not an attorney, but because of my experience, because of my background, because of my legal training, I do have a pretty good perspective on what I read. And I had an understanding of what I read, and I could understand what was going on here, which again is what I have seen many people not have the benefit of. They may have read a couple of the pages, but again, they cherry pick things. This is the settlement. So I'm going to go through and quote most of it and then kind of expand upon some of it a little bit based upon what's actually happening there. The first and most important thing, or first and foremost thing that I want to point out too in this settlement is that this settlement is only for licensed realtors. This is not for licensed agents. So that is also a point of clarification that is necessary, that to be a real estate agent, you are not required to be a realtor. A realtor is somebody that is an agent and has joined the National Association of Realtors. So we call them a realtor. Another way to put that is that all realtors are agents, but not all agents are realtors. So if you are a licensed agent and also a member of NAR, then you are a realtor, and this settlement, whatever happens here, will be bound upon you. If you are a realtor, you have to follow these rules. This, my friends, has absolutely no impact on anybody that is not a realtor. So if you are a sailor, a FSBO, if you are a licensed agent and not a member of NAR, this settlement means nothing to you, not directly, maybe indirectly, because maybe in let's say a FSBO transaction, you might have a realtor that brings a buyer and then we'll have to deal with that. Or you're a listing agent, not a realtor, but you're a listing agent, not a member of NAR, and you have a buyer's agent that is a member of NAR, that is a realtor. So that would be the indirect impact that you may have. But directly, this settlement has no part of this. You don't have to abide by any of it. If you are a seller and if you are a licensed agent that is not a member of NAR, that is not a realtor. So a point a point of clarity on that I want to make sure they understood. The Sorry, I'm going through my notes here. I apologize. I lost my place for just a second. So I went through that. Okay. So one of the first things, or the first thing that the settlement includes, is that it says eliminate and prohibit the requirement that listing realtor brokers or sellers must make offers of compensation to a buyer's agent. Eliminate and prohibit the requirement that you have to make a offer of compensation. This is crap. This is crap because it has never been a requirement. This implicates, or this would imply, that there has been a requirement that you have to offer a compensation. You do not, never had to. Now, there are a couple of things that are important to understand with that, and I'll get into that here in just a second. But from the standpoint of requirement of any cooperation, there's never been that. It has always been, and should have always been, a discussion that the listing agent has with the seller, that in the strategy says that we should probably, not you're required to, we should probably, I would recommend that we offer a buyer agent a commission, because when we do that, then we're going to have a greater number of buyers that are not obligated then to pay a commission to their agent. And we will get this thing sold quicker, and we will make more money on that sale. We will basically, through a supply and demand, we'll be able to sell your home for more. So that's what that is. That's all that is that it's never been a requirement. So I hate that this language is in there because it is so misleading. Certainly, maybe, again, some agents have made it out that it was a requirement. So I'm not going to say that idiots out there, licensed agents, realtors, have said that it's a requirement. I would acknowledge that some agents say that. But as far as the system, as far as that works, again, 95 or more, or whatever, a large number of their agents have never, ever put this out there. So again, the few agents that have, screw you. But everybody else that has not, this is not a thing. Now, having said that, it is important to note that if an agent, a listing agent particularly, and or a seller, if they offer a commission to a buyer, then they are required to pay what they have offered. So if a seller or a listing agent says, I'm going to pay you, buyer agent, you find a buyer for me, I'm going to pay you $1,000. I am required to pay the $1,000. That is different than saying that you were required to offer the $1,000. You didn't have to offer anything. You could have offered, a nickel, a quarter, a dollar, nothing, whatever. There's not been a requirement for a commission, nor has there been a requirement of even any amount. Just again, in part of the discussion as a listing agent, I'm going to tell a seller that if we want to entice the greatest number of buyers to get your property sold quicker and to get it sold for more money, which is what sellers are looking for, I would guarantee in all transactions, we should make, I should say, we should make an offer of compensation to buyers. Not required. Not required, guys. Never has been. Never has been. So want to make that clear. The next thing is to prohibit realtors from making an offer of compensation on the MLS or disclosing on the MLS any buyer agent's compensation, listing compensation, or total compensation. So again, what this piece of the settlement says is that you cannot include any part of an advertisement or in the MLS. You cannot explain or describe any commission that is paid, which is sad. It's sad. I understand why they did it. The reason they did it is because they don't want buyer agents to cherry pick, which is another rule that we'll get to here in a little bit. But at the end of the day, this information will still be disseminated. People will still find this information out. They're just not going to find it out through the MLS. So again, this was ridiculous to me. It just makes things more complicated, more paperwork. It just takes it off of the MLS, but it doesn't stop what happens. It doesn't do anything. It just, again, I thought that this was also crap. But again, they put it out there. And the other thing's important about this is that this does not have anything to do with sellers being able to pay commissions. As I just mentioned, it absolutely it behooves sellers to pay a buyer agent commission. We'll get into more of that as we go work through this. But again, if the seller wants to have the most number of buyers that won't have the obligations and all that of not offering this, if you want the highest price, if you want to sell your home quicker, then you will be competitive by offering a buyer agent commission. Again, not because you're required to, but because the market would command it, that the market would recognize it, that buyers will command it, that they're going to say, I want the seller to pay. We've been doing it for 100 years, and not because it's tradition, but just because that's the way the market has been put together. That's the way market prices have been put together. Market prices include commissions for both agents. More on that later. But again, we can still offer commissions. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult in how we disseminate that, but it will still be disseminated. So again, thanks for screwing us over on this settlement piece, because again, we won't put it on the MLS, but we will put it in other places, which just makes it more complicated, less transparent, more of an issue for the entire real estate industry and buyers and sellers and everybody else. So good job on that, guys. Next settlement piece. They require realtor MLSs. So this is the MLS system to eliminate the fields that would include compensation. So the first or the previous one said that you can't put any compensation on there at all. This says that the MLS system has to remove the cell. That think of it as like a database that this MLS database includes the address and the bedroom counts, the square footage, and all that. One of those pieces of the database did include the commission, what we are offering to a buyer agent. So this line simply says that you're required to remove that from the cell, that you can, or from the sheet, that you cannot have that cell, that piece of data in there anymore. And it also goes on to say that you cannot, that a real estate agent, a realtor specifically, cannot put it in any other cell. So even though we've deleted the place where you would normally put it, you can't put commission in the comments. You can't put it, in the address. This is 3%, Main Street. Can't do that. The commission cannot be anywhere on this sheet at all. So again, that's the idea of this particular settlement piece, is that it's saying that you cannot have that on there and eliminate the cell. The next one is that, or the next piece of the settlement says that they're going to eliminate and prohibit any requirements conditioning participation or membership in NAR on offering or accepting offers of compensation. Again, guys, this is such a crock of crap. This has never been true, as I've said before. That there has never been any requirement that when you join the National Association of Realtors, when you join an MLS, that you are required to have any compensation, or that you're going to have any offers of compensation. Again, you can, and most did, but I will tell you that I have seen plenty of listings out there, or say plenty, but I have seen listings out there where there was little to no compensation at all. And again, that was just part of the strategy that the seller and listing agent chose. They weren't worried about the number of buyers or the price or whatever. Again, I can't speak to their rationale, but regardless, it has never been predicated, never, being a realtor never required me that I had to make a compensation, not an amount, not anything. I hate again that this is in here, because when people read this, it makes it sound like this is what's been happening. Now, again, I will tell you, and I've said it several times, you'll hear me say it several times again, I absolutely know there are POS agents that have done this. So, and those agents should be held accountable, but they are it's just a fraction of what the entire industry has done and has been doing, that again, it's just unfortunate that all of us are being put in timeout because of a few people that were jerks and acted up and misbehaved. So this is another area that, again, I absolutely believe and know that agents have done some of these things, but they have been rogue agents. This is not systemic. This has not been part of any system or any requirement or anything like that at all. This is just so frustrating that came about. All right, next piece of the settlement is that we agree not to create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism for listing brokers to make offers of compensation to buyer brokers. Now, this one's interesting. I will be very interested to see or hear how this will be interpreted and how it will be put out there. Effectively, what this part of the agreement says is that real estate agents can also not advertise commissions on third-party sites. So this includes realtor.com. This includes Zillow.com. If there's any third-party site, obviously the realtor sites can't do this as per the previous settlement pieces, but this also says that as a real estate agent, as a realtor specifically, I cannot, I agree rather, to not create or post on any third-party site offers of compensation. Which, again, how that's going to work out, I don't know. Because, again, this information will still get out there. It will still get out there. This makes it even more complicated. Just further adds to the frustration that buyers and sellers and agents will go through to still get the same information we've always been getting. It's just we want to hide it now. We want to make it, again, less transparent. I can't stand this, guys. I'm sorry. Just this is another piece that's so frustrating. And to add salt to the wound here, this rule goes on to say that this rule that I just read you, where you cannot put it on non-MLS systems, it says that this rule is not violated if, are you ready for this? Realtors displaying both MLS data and offers of compensation to buyers brokers, but only on listings from their own brokerage. What that is saying, guys, is that if you are a brokerage firm, your website, your brokerage website, can have all of your listings on that site and advertise what the commission rate is. This, my friends, is going to screw buyers over. It's going to screw sellers over, because it's going to propagate and make that limited agency, that dual agency, become more common. It's going to provide less service, less advocacy for buyers and sellers. That is going to, quite honestly, this feeds into big brokerage firms. And again, I don't even get on my soapbox for that. Big brokerage firms looking out for themselves too, not because of this settlement, but this is just an ongoing issue with regard to how they operate. That is just skirting the line, in my opinion, on this, with in-house agency and in-house transactions, which, again, I'm going to avoid that conversation now, because then it's just going to get me riled up even more than I already am. But regardless, that individual brokerage firms can put it on their sites, which is going to help the big brokerage firms, going to not help the smaller brokerage firms. And again, you can put together what's going to happen with that. Now, again, I don't want to be all doom and gloom and sky is falling. I don't know what will happen here, but certainly there is nothing good out of this at all. Nothing good out of this at all, where you have a few major players that are going to dominate in this. And anytime you get into this, Talk about antitrust. I'm not suggesting that that's what's going to happen, but certainly it's going to be a lot like that. I would almost, I would think. I don't know. Again, we'll see. We'll see. Next piece of the settlement says, unless state or federal law says differently, all realtors working with a buyer must enter into a written agreement before the buyer tours any home with the following. We'll get into the following here just a little bit, but real quick, let's talk about what this says. So first, there's no federal guidelines that deal with this situation. Almost probably not will ever be. There could be. I don't want to say definitively that there's not, but right now there's no federal rule that addresses this. There are some state rules that address this though. And what this is saying is that if you are a realtor, you must complete and write out a buyer agency contract with a buyer before you show them a home. So I am a buyer's agent. You are a buyer. You're interested in having me help you look for homes. Before we can go through that, if I am a realtor, I must have you sign a contract with me before I can show it to you. Nobody can show you. No licensed realtor, I'm sorry, no realtor can show you that property unless they have this agreement. Now, some states do not have that as a requirement. So Indiana right now, in March of 2024, Indiana does not have that. And many states do not have that as a requirement. So all agents, any agent, not realtor, but any agent will not have to fill out this document once this goes into place. However, because of this settlement, because of other issues, many states, including Indiana, will be adding this to their state statute. So right now, what this says, this again deals only with realtors. If you are a realtor representing a buyer, you must have a buyer contract. However, most states, and some of them already do, but most states are enacting various laws that will require every agent, not just realtors, but every agent to have this contract, which is a good move, in my opinion. It's something that should have been there. Again, I'm just sad that it hasn't been there, but now it's the realtors are going to have to do this, and in most states, agents, no matter what, will have to have that kind of a contract. Again, I kind of cut it off, but it said that they must enter in the written agreement before the buyer tours a home with the following. So the contract must include. The agreement must conspicuously disclose the amount of commission the buyer agent will receive, or how much or how it will be calculated. So on this contract, it not only has to say it has to be conspicuous. Conspicuous can mean a lot of different things, but generally speaking, it means that it's going to be larger fonts. It's going to be in bold. It's going to stand out. It's not just here's 5 pages of a contract and somewhere in there is this language. It's going to be 5 pages, and here in bold, big letters, conspicuously, it will show this is my commission. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm negotiating, and this is how it will be paid or calculated. That compensation, that goes on to say, must be objectively ascertainable and not open-ended. So in other words, a real estate agent can't say, hey, you owe me whatever somebody else is willing to pay. So that's just too open-ended. We must have a dollar or percentage amount. I want to receive, I'm going to negotiate with you, buyer, that I want to receive $3,000. I want to receive 2%, whatever. There is a static number that I'm going to choose, or percentage I'm going to choose. It's not variable. It's not, hey, just whatever we kind of figure out or what we feel for that time. It has to be discernible. We have to know what it is. It can't be, again, just ambiguous. With that, then the next part of this also goes on to say that the buyer agent may not receive more than the agreed upon commission in that agreement. So let's say, just in this example, that I write a contract. We have a contract. I'm the buyer's agent representing the buyer, and I write in there that I want to be paid $3,000. That's our contract amount. I want $3,000. I find a home for you, home that you love, and buyer says, great, I want to buy this home. Let's go through that. And let's say that the seller was offering $4,000 to me. As the buyer agent, they were offering me $4,000. That's what the split was. I cannot receive $4,000. Even though that was what they were offering, I can only get what I put on this contract. So if I ask for $3,000, that's the most I can get. If I ask for 2% and the seller or the listing agent's offering me 3%, I am capped at that 2% number. I cannot receive a penny over what I've contracted for. And again, remember, it has to be spelled out what that number is, not just, hey, if it's more than 2%, I get that. No, it is 2%. It is $3,000, whatever the number is, that is your maximum amount and that if somebody cooperating and is giving more, you can't get the more. Now, how you handle that again will open up another can of worms. Is that the market price, the price that the seller is predicated on, was based upon maybe a higher percentage, maybe a higher dollar amount. What do you do with that extra $1,000? Because again, remember, I asked for three, the seller's offering four, I can only get three. There's this $1,000 that the seller had built in that they were willing to basically give to you, buyer. How are we going to address that? That's going to open up a can of worms on how we address that too. But in any case, with regard to this, the agency or the buyer agent is stuck or is limited to whatever they've agreed to. Again, as I had mentioned earlier, this should have been done long ago. This is one of the things that I wish NAR and states would have put out a long time ago. I'm glad that they're doing it now, finally, but it's kind of sad that it hasn't happened before now. So anyway, that's what that is. The next piece that we get into, or the next piece of the settlement says that we will prohibit realtors from representing that their services are free or no cost to buyers unless that realtor will not receive any form of financial compensation. I'm so glad that they cleared up something that should have been done a long time ago. This has never been the case. I have been witness to agents, to realtors, to everybody that says that it's free to use me, buyer. You don't have to pay me a commission. And while it may be true that the seller is paying the commission, it is not free. Again, we'll get more into this when I talk about appraisal and cash equivalency here in a little bit, but that is built into the market price. It is built into the market price. So it's not that you're getting it for free. It's that maybe you don't have to pay for it because the seller in the market price of the home that they've listed pays for the buyer's commission. So it has never been free. And agents that have ever said this, you guys need to get your head straight on straight. And again, I know that agents have done it. I have seen it. I've seen advertising that it costs you nothing to hire me as a buyer agent. Absolutely furthest thing from the truth. That is absolutely not true. That the buyer may not have to pay it, but it is still a cost because the increased price, and it's not an increased price, it's just that it's built into that market price. And again, more on that as I work through the cash equivalency thing on what that looks like financially. But that's what that kind of gets into. The next piece of the settlement says that realtors must conspicuously disclose to sellers and obtain seller approval for any commission the listing broker will provide to a buyer's agent. This again is such a crock of crap because this has been true again for a number of agents and most states. I will acknowledge, and again, this is one of the things that probably created some of this lawsuit in those small situations in some states, but that in most states, this has already been in place when when a listing agent lists a property for a seller in that contract, there is language in there that says that seller, I've negotiated with you to pay me, let's say 6%. And also of that 6%, I agree to split that with a buyer agent. So it's not that you're paying 6% and paying the buyer agency. You're going to pay again through this negotiation that we've worked through that you're going to pay me 6%. And of that 6%, I'm going to split some of it and pay it to a buyer agent. That has been in most contracts throughout the country. I do know not all states have. I do know that not all agents have done a good job of explaining that. So again, there is some culpability in that. But again, to say that it's systemic, that it is just true, this is also another piece that, again, has been put out there by many news media outlets and all that agents have been screwing sellers over by making them pay the buyer agency without their knowledge. That is not true. I absolutely believe it has happened in limited circumstances, but it has not been prolific. It has not been substantial. It has happened in a few things. So I want to make that clear on that. Next piece of the settlement, realtors must conspicuously state in the contract that that broker commissions are not set by any law and are fully negotiable. Again, this has always been true. This has always been followed by most of the market. When you read this, it sounds like this is something new again. I can't stand this, guys. I told you I was going to be a little frustrated about it, but so much of this has already been in place. There's so little of this that is new, But the way that you read it, it sounds like, oh my gosh, all these, we've been screwed for so many years when nobody or I should say nobody, very few people have. There are people that have been, and I feel sorry for them, and I hope they get their day in court to be able to settle that. But for most buyers and sellers, this is just nothing. That again, it's never been set by law, ever been set by law, never by an association. Now, I do want to talk about one thing that kind of ties into this, though, that's important to recognize. We're talking about trade organizations, we're talking about state agencies and all that saying that there's a fixed rate. It is, has been, and always, or I should say always will be, but will continue to be for us into the conceivable future, that an individual agent and an individual brokerage firm can set their prices. A very common thing that a brokerage firm, not the whole industry, not all brokers in town, but broker A has said that when we list property, we're going to include these things. This is, if you want to list with us, this is what we require. Agents can also do that. However, because of antitrust issues, we cannot collude with other agents and say, hey, everybody, let's charge this same amount. That's what this is implying, is that everybody's been colluding together and all offering it. Nobody's ever been required to. Individual brokerage firms can choose to do this. So there's been an analogy that my wife actually shared with me that I liked a lot, that if you are looking to buy a gallon of milk, you can go to Kroger or some national chain and they might offer it for $3 a gallon. And you might say, I don't want to pay $3. That's fine. I charge $3. Our price is fixed. We charge $3. But that doesn't mean that you can't go to Walmart or another Beals or something like that, depending where you are. Go to another store and maybe get it for $2.50. So none of the grocery chains are colluding together and we're all charging $3 a gallon. It's the same thing here. The agencies are not, the real estate brokerage firms are not colluding together, coming up with this one set price, but each individual firm, just like Kroger, can set their price on milk, and we are not negotiable on our price of milk. You don't like our price, you can go to the next person next door, to the grocery store next door, and they might have it for less. And you have that in your power to do. Nobody is obligating you from buying milk from Kroger any more than anybody is obligating you to hiring the agent that is going to say, I'm only charging this amount, I'm not negotiable. So there's a difference between an agent and a broker saying, this is my fixed price, just like Kroger is saying, this is my fixed price, versus the entire industry saying that we're all charging the same amount. We're all doing the same thing. Because I'll tell you, again, just being out there and practicing and being involved in it, it is more and more common, or yeah, more common that there's any even coincidental similar charges. There's all kinds of brokerage, different services, all kinds of things that are that change how brokers charge their fees, have their commission rates set up and all that. So again, this thing was this particular rule was again just my opinion, a crock of crap. Really didn't do anything that hasn't already been in place, but it certainly seems like it's been all out there that we've been screwing people over for forever. The next, or really it's the last major piece of the settlement that I wanted to point out here, is that realtors must not filter out listings that do not offer commissions. This, my friends, has been true for forever. I wish this part of it had more teeth. This is one of the things that I wish that they would put more out there. Unfortunately, again, there are piece of crap agents that will, when representing a buyer, will skip over listings if they don't pay what the agent wants. So kind of characterizing that a little bit differently. Again, I'm a buyer agent representing a buyer. Buyer's giving me their criteria. They want this 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch home, blah, 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 this price range. I, as their realtor, as their agent, am looking around. I'm doing a search and I'm finding, let's say, 10 homes. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying, I want to earn $3,000. I want to, if I sell this home, I want $3,000. That's my non-negotiable price. That's fine that you do that. You can, if you've negotiated with their buyer ahead of time, you can do that. But what those agents, or some of those agents, have done is that they'll go through again those 10 listings and say, well, 2 of them are only offering me $2,000. The other ones are offering me $3,000. So 8 of the 10 are offering me 3. I'm going to show those 8 to my buyer. But the 2 that only pay me $2,000, I'm not showing it to them. I'm not even going to let them see. I'm going to filter it out. I'm going to delete it so that way the buyer doesn't even know that it exists. I'm going to hide it from them. And unfortunately, in some cases, one of those two properties that again weren't paying the buyer agent what they wanted, that might have been the perfect home for this buyer. And that has happened, unfortunately, that buyers have been screwed over as a result of that. So this is designed to stop that. And I will be very interested in seeing how this actually gets put together, what the teeth will be on that. But I don't see, I wish there was more to this part of it, and they just didn't put it out there. But again, just as a warning for people out there that are doing this, we're watching, and they're going to be watching this more carefully. The last two pieces of the settlement that I just kind of want to go through is just to say that again, I have read all 108 pages, and I could certainly go through all 108 pages, but the balance of this settlement agreement was more about court proceedings, filing requirements, things like that. So there is more to this settlement, but all the pieces that I have not included had no impact on any of the things that would affect agents and the public, buyers and sellers and all that. So I did want to say that. I don't want you to think that I just went through the entire agreement. I went through all the pieces that affected the public, that affected real estate agents, that will affect people that are in the industry. All the rest of the settlement was about, who gets paid what, how it will be paid, and what, and all the details of the court processes and filings and all that. So there is more, but it had nothing to do with the part that's most important to the public. The last thing that I thought was interesting in the settlement that they kind of concluded with some of this is that all of these obligations will terminate 7 years after this class notice date. So the curiosity is what will happen in 7 years. Honestly, I don't think much, but still, I'll be watching this in 2031 or whatever it ends up being. What will happen at that point? I mean, I don't think it'll ever go back necessarily. Maybe it will. I don't know. I have no idea. But at least they put a cap on this right now, that it's no more than 7 years, or that after 7 years it stops. So be interested to see what that happens. Sorry, I need to take a drink. Been talking a lot, eh? Going on for a little bit more than an hour. All right. I say wrap this up. I'm not done yet, so don't tune out yet. But taking all of those things, taking all those settlement pieces, keeping in mind the legal wranglings that I've talked about, talking about the media, talking about the actual settlement agreement items. Now I kind of want to talk about what this looks like going forward, generally speaking. Again, I have no idea the details. Nobody does, because it hasn't been fully agreed upon, hasn't been, again, worked through. We're not sure all the details of what's going to happen here. We just have the broad strokes. But there are a few things that I know to be true. This does not eliminate commissions. Unfortunately, that misinformation and a lot of people are interpreting, again, the settlement pieces. It makes it sound like that this is going to go away. It just makes it more difficult to do this, which again is sad. It's sad for the industry, sad for buyers and sellers, sad for everybody. There were other ways that this could have been handled. Again, I'm not here to judge the legal process because I've not been in the background, but in my opinion, it could have been handled a little bit differently. But again, we wanted the money, so we wanted to make sure we covered that. Okay, I'm moving on from that piece. But again, sadly, many news organizations have attacked real estate agents and all that. I mean, not physically attacked, but just using some of these settlement pieces to say all the industry sucks, and it just doesn't. There are agents that do, but they haven't. Another thing going forward, buyers and sellers absolutely need real estate professionals. And again, this is not me saying it because I have any investment in this, but just simply understanding the components of real estate process, just the legal wranglings. Again, speaking just briefly about, I mean, just dozens of cases that I have studied in law school that deal with transactions where a buyer and seller privately transacted a home, did not involve an agent, and basically screwed themselves. This happens a lot when you have a professional. They're going to help you with this, a true professional, a real professional, not a scummy real estate agent that wants to take advantage. They're out there, but a true professional. So just like you wouldn't perform a surgery on yourself, you're going to hire a doctor. You're going to enlist the help of a doctor to help you with that. If you're going to, create a contract, if you're going to write some legal doctrine, you're going to go to a professional. If you want to buy or sell a home, you need a real estate professional, period. The industry will not change from that. That with respect to buyers and sellers out there, there are so many pitfalls to the transaction of a real estate, or the real estate transaction, that you need a professional to help you through it. There's so many issues with regard to the contract itself, to title, to inspection, to insurance, to just all the different pieces, the closings, the different fees, all these things. Unless you are well versed, and well trained, you will need a real estate professional. So this will not stop that. But again, it seems like that a lot of members of the public are now incensed because they've been screwed over, even though you have not. It just makes it look like it has because of the way it's been put out there. But again, you will need real estate professionals. What this is going to do is, again, just change how all that works. And unfortunately, it's going to make it worse for everybody, at least for the short term. Now, again, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I don't want to be the sky is falling. I don't know what these rules will look like going forward. Again, I know the settlement pieces, but the rules have not been actually formulated and then put through the system to then come down to all the agents and how that'll work. Again, once that happens, I'll certainly record a new episode on what that looks like. But right now, we don't know. But I do know this also as well, is that one of the things that has been very important, and I absolutely agree because this is part of why the lawsuit came about, is that there's the disclosure piece. There's more disclosure that always should have been included and has been for most transactions, but understanding that it hasn't. So there's going to be more training on that. There's going to be more expectations of that disclosure. And with that disclosure, the public will have a better understanding. So I think right now, again, people are all up in arms and think they've gotten screwed over. They will discover, I promise you, at some point, they're going to say, we really did need a real estate agent. That I thought they were screwing me over, but they weren't. Again, some of them have been, but most of them have not. So it'll be very interesting to go through with that. Another thing that is of note to me is that even through all this, again, depending on what this looks like, that in most commercial transactions and even in some residential transactions is for some port or to some degree, this new proposed settlement has been the way they've been doing it. So if you're a commercial agent, you've been paying attention to this, for most of you, you're probably laughing about this settlement because you're saying, we've been doing that for years. And so many commercial agents have done it this way. This is more on the residential side. So again, not that it's right or wrong or whatever, but again, just this is not a new system that nobody has ever heard of before. It's just a little bit different how it works. And commercial agents would admit, I've sold commercial property. It's a pain in the ass, to be honest, because of some of the way that it works. That's why I know that this is going to end up being a bigger problem for people. But regardless, it's not new. Going to take more paperwork, more communication, and again, as I've said, I'm afraid that it's going to have less transparency, even though it's supposed to be more disclosure because of the lack of being able to share information. Now it's going to be less transparent. So I don't know what that'll be, but usually the lesser amount of transparency, the worse it is for people in general. Again, we'll see what happens. But I will. But again, another piece that I had written down here is that and I've mentioned this before. Sellers, it absolutely will behoove you. Again, I want to be clear, not because you're required, even though the settlement says it that way, not because you're required. The market is predicated, has been, will be, and continue to be to some degree predicated on the idea that the seller pays the commission. It is built into the price. So it's not that anybody's taking advantage of you. Seller, you need a buyer to buy your home. You want the greatest number of agents available to you to get that accomplished. The more buyers you have, the better you're going to sell your home. Say the better, the quicker, and for more money. It is a supply and demand issue, straight up. You guys can do this. I say do the math. You get the concept. If you have your home for sale and you only have one buyer that wants to buy it, they're going to negotiate. You're like, hey, this is the only one that's going to buy it. I'm going to be more negotiable as the seller. However, if as a seller, you have 20 people that want to buy your home, you're going to be able to command a lot more. That's why you want to do this. Again, not because you have to, but because it makes sense for you to. So many sellers out there, I hope that you're hearing me. This is to your advantage. You are not getting screwed over. You are not being taken advantage of. Again, keep saying it. I know some people have because of the lack of disclosure, the lack of transparency. But at the end of the day, this is the way that the market has been built up, that the market includes this commission amount that usually gets split between the buyer and seller, buyer seller agent, I should say, rather. So it is built into the price. You are not getting screwed over. This is something that when you list your property for sale, when your agent does a CMA, that CMA includes the commission that is paid by both. And that is a market thing. That is not an agent thing. That is not an agency thing. That is not a state statute thing or a National Association of Realtors thing. That is the market speaking, that the buyers and sellers over decades have said that the seller is going to pay the commission. It's built into the price. And so when we sell this home, buyer agent, you're going to get your money that way. Again, not because it's been required, but simply that's the way that it has worked. So making sure that we know that. Without this, guys, without this, there's going to be, and again, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom with this too, but on top of that supply and demand issue, that if sellers, if you don't offer this, and again, this is something that you can speak with your agents about, and you can decide on what you want to do here. But what's going to happen to this too is that buyers, again, not only are going to be less interested in your property because of the obligation they would have in paying their agent, but also those buyers will be unrepresented. And in that lack of representation, that buyer is going to rely upon your listing agent for help. That's just a straight up fact of what's going to happen. Now, what your agent does with that, I don't know. But remember, we talked a little bit earlier about sub agency, where we had two agents that were working for the seller and nobody working for the buyer. That could be a problem. That's certainly going to be a problem for the buyer. So buyers out there, watch this. You might say, "Hey, screw it. I don't need an agent. I'm going to get it for myself, and I'm going to discount the price, whatever. I'm going to get a great deal on this," but you're not going to have representation, and you cannot rely upon the listing agent because they're not watching out for you. Think of it sub-agency wise. You're not going to be represented. What will also likely happen to some degree is something, again, I mentioned earlier, either dual agency. I can see that increasing, which is not good for either party. Remember, dual agency is where one agent represents the buyer and the seller, but the representation is as a facilitator. I am not an advocate. If I represent both of you, I represent the buyer and seller in the same transaction, I cannot advocate for you. I cannot try to get you the highest price seller. I can't. Seller says, "Well, can't we get more?" It's like, I don't know. I don't know. If I was only your agent, I could work for that. I would fight for you. I would get as high as I possibly could, just like the attorneys did here. I'm going to fight for as much as I can for you. But if I represent the buyer, if I help you, seller, get the highest price, that means I'm screwing over this other person that I also represent that is supposed to be getting the lowest price. I cannot get you the highest price and then at the same time get the buyer the lowest price. Because of that, I can't be an agent for either of you. So basically, I am a paperwork pusher. Paperwork, paperwork pusher. I'm going to help you with the contract. I'm going to help you with the transaction, but I'm not advocating for you. Sellers, buyers, I don't think you want this. I think that you want, you will absolutely want to have representation. So this will hurt you unless we handle this in a better way. Another area of mischaracterization of this, again, is kind of shifting gears here a little bit, that I've seen to some degree, and it's going to be a bigger issue. People just haven't thought about it all the way through. But as I've said, I've thought about it in a lot of different ways. What is this going to do to valuation? I've said over several different instances, different examples here, that the market is predicated on the seller paying the commission. Not because they have to, but because that's what buyers and sellers have put together in the supply and demand market of the real estate transaction. Real estate agents have not promulgated this. Some of them have, but just as a general rule, buyers and sellers have acknowledged that this is part of the market. We've been doing it like that. The market has worked that way for, again, a century. So this is not anything new. So what's going to happen here is that you might have a seller that says, "Well, gosh, now that I don't have to pay a buyer agent, that's fine." But what's going to have to happen here is that the buyer, if they want representation, which they will, they should, they're going to want representation. Now the buyer's going to have to pay the commission. Fine. But what the buyer's going to do is to say, to do that, I'm going to want to negotiate more with you, seller. So here's what happens, and this is what happens even in a FSBO situation. This is why FSBOs generally sell for less, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why, is something called cash equivalency. So let me work through this with you. The market value of your home, again, based upon a commission, let's just say 6%, just to use that number because it'll make the math easy and something you can follow. The market value of your property is $100,000, and that is predicated on a market of that buyers and sellers have agreed that 6% would command as a commission. That the 6% will be split between the selling agent or the listing agent and the buyer's agent. So what that means, forgetting all of the costs, forgetting all the other closing fees, let's just keep this easy, that on a $100,000 sale, that the seller is going to net, or rather get a cash equivalency of $94,000. They sold the home at market value for 100, and they're going to end up getting $94,000. Again, forgetting all of the costs, liens, things that need to be paid off. Let's just keep it easy and only talk about the commission. That means the seller would have gotten a $94,000 check. And again, the market has said that that's okay. Sellers have said that that's okay. When a property is listed, they are fully aware of this. They have been disclosed this. There's a net sheet that they're given that shows we sold your home for $100,000. You've paid us 6%, so you're getting $94,000. It wasn't a sleight of hand. Again, it's all been disclosed, all been explained. Even on the closing documents, it's been explained or been out there. If again, getting back into the scenario, the seller says, I'm not going to pay the buyer agent, and the buyer's going to have to pay for it themselves. What that means, guys, is this. Your market value of $100,000 is now $97,000. What I came up with that, the way I come up with that is that, again, you as the seller, you're willing to pay your listing agent. So you're going to pay them 3%. I'm not paying 3% for the seller or for the buyer's agent. I'm not paying that part. I'm only going to pay for my agent. The buyer can pay for their own. Buyer says, that's fine. I'll pay my agent 3%. You're not going to do it. I'll do it. But I'm going to buy that home for $97,000 because I'm not going to pay $103,000 for a home that's worth $100,000. What buyer is going to pay a seller $100,000 for a home? I'm sorry. They're not going to pay $103,000. This is what they'd have to do. Seller, here's your $100,000 that you want, and also I have to pay $3,000 to my agent. They ended up paying $103,000 for this home, and it's worth $100,000. Buyers will not do that, not generally speaking. So buyers are going to say, seller, if you're going to sell it without an agent commission, I need to buy it for $97,000. That way I can pay my agent $3,000, which ends up meaning that I'm buying that home for $100,000, which is the market value for the property, which was based upon market sales, which were based upon the 6% commission that has always, I shouldn't say always been in place, but that concept, the concept of the seller paying the commission has been in place. Sellers, if you think that you're going to get a windfall here, you're not going to happen. It's not going to happen. A prudent buyer that is well educated and knowledgeable about this will not let you get away with this. They will not pay you $100,000 and pay a commission. If the home was worth 103, they'll pay you 100 and then pay the 3,000. But the fact of the matter is, a prudent buyer that is well educated by their good agents, which I know my agents will be trained, and everybody that ever takes one of my classes will be trained, is that seller, you're going to have to sell that home for 97. So guess what? You're still getting $94,000. You're still getting $94,000 for that property. So why, knowing that, would you want to list your home without a buyer agent, a commission, knowing that you're going to get 94,000 regardless of how this works out? But if I list it with the buyer agent commission, then I'm going to get more buyers. I can get maybe a higher price. Maybe I can get more demand out there, which might change some of this, which again might affect the market supply. I'm sorry, the market value too. So I'm oversimplifying this, but the concept is absolutely true. And it's something that market and the buyers and sellers and real estate agents, if you don't understand this already, you will be learning it very quickly. Appraisers, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all the lenders, everybody that's out there, underwriters, are all going to be watching this, paying attention to this from not only the contractual piece, but also from the market value standpoint, something that is already in effect. And again, I'm a real estate appraiser. That Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and something called USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's basically the Bible for appraisers, says that we have to analyze purchase contracts. And if I see that a seller and that a transaction is going through and that home is being sold for $100,000, but the seller is not paying the buyer's commission, I'm going to tell you going to tell you that in a lot of cases, the appraiser is going to look at this thing and say, your home is only worth $97,000 because you're not including the market pieces that is expected in this market, that buyers are going to want to pay, that they're going to expect that from you, seller. And if you're not going to do it, you're not required to. But at the end of the day, I'm going to discount your price. And so will the appraiser. So watch for that. Now, a couple last things. I know I'm looking at my clock here. I'm at about an hour and 20. I'm glad. Thank you for sticking with me. I know there's a lot going on here, but again, I wanted to give you the complete explanation of this, not just little cherry pick things. I want to make sure that you know all the pieces of this, again, based upon what we know today. A couple of things I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about real quickly is what would I have included in the settlement? Again, this was not, but I wish that were included. One of the things is that I wish that NAR had included a stipulation, or that was negotiated, that they police their own agents. Unfortunately, NAR and its affiliate members self-police. What that means simply is that agents have to tattle on each other, and nobody's going to do that. I mean, very rarely, certainly in extreme situations, but it's hard to prove, and nobody wants to be the tattletale. So basically, it's saying, we trust that you guys will police each other, and that if something bad happens, you'll tell us. But that's not what happens. I can tell you without question. I've seen it happen multiple times where people are, this agent did this really terrible, horrible, god awful thing that they should lose their license for, but I don't want to turn them in because then that means I'm going to have to go through it. I'm going to have to testify. I'm going to have to be the tattletale. I'm going to be labeled the tattletale, and they won't do it. I wish that there would be some oversight that NAR would create that is an active way of monitoring agents through an auditing process. There's multiple ways that it could probably happen, but unfortunately, too many agents are getting away with some of this stuff. Again, this is why this lawsuit came about, because agents have done these things, and I'm sure that there are more. Again, I don't think it's throughout the whole thing. I don't think it's systemic, but still, there are many agents that do this. If they policed it, if they audited it, if they watched it, then they would catch more of this and be able to eliminate those agents. So they didn't do that. I also wish that NAR would get rid of dual agency. Yes, I know it's going to piss off some agents, and I don't care. Dual agency sucks. In very rare instances, does it work out for the buyer and seller? Very rare instances. So I don't want to say it's always bad, but I mean, gosh, if I were to put a number to it, 98% of the time, it is not good for anybody. It's not good for the buyer. It's not good for the seller. It's not good for the agent that's involved. Dual agency is terrible because of the lack of disclosure, lack of transparency, lack of fiduciary responsibilities, or at least the actions that agents do that are probably against license law and code and all that they get away with and they shouldn't. So dual agency needs to go away. Some states have already done this. I wish Indiana would. I can't stand that Indiana doesn't. I'm not going to get on my soapbox with that, but many states have, and I wish that NAR would have done something about that too. The last thing that I wish that NAR would have included in this is to create, and maybe they will, is that they create some sort of a public service advertisement, some sort of a campaign that goes out there to explain to the public the requirements that agents have for their clients, for buyers and sellers. I know that they put out ad campaigns. Hey, we're great. You should always hire a realtor because we have your back. Well, clearly not everybody has. And part of that is because buyers and sellers didn't know what to expect. I go to an agent hoping that they're going to help me, and they did some things, but I didn't realize they were screwing me over. I didn't realize they didn't disclose this. I didn't realize they included something that I didn't know what it was. So in order to protect the public, put out an ad campaign that says that here are the things your agents are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to disclose this. They're supposed to say this. They're not supposed to do that. So it's not just, hey, hire a realtor because we're professionals, because they're not all professionals. And not everybody knows what to look for. So the public needs to know more about what to expect from an agent. That is one of the things that I put out on many of my podcasts when I teach this, when I put together workshops. It's one of the top things that I wish that the public had more understanding, because again, they don't realize that they are being I'd say screwed over, but some of them are being taken advantage of because of their lack of knowledge. I wish that NAR would do a better job of explaining that. Wrapping this up, a couple of things. I do want to say that this change, whatever it ends up being, will not be any different from the standpoint of what happened because of the buyer agency change back in the 90s, because of the 2008 recession. All this will be managed. It's going to suck for a little bit. We'll figure it out. I don't think it's going to be for the better, but we will get down some processes and all that. Just we have to be ready to shift. We have to be ready to pivot. Again, get information. What I would suggest to all of you, anybody that's listening, is to stay up on this stuff. Again, I will certainly put things out there. There are other people that are not biased, that don't have an opinion, or rather not have an opinion, but have a slant on it, like news sources and social media people and TikTok people. You all can go to hell as far as I'm concerned, with respect, but go to hell, because you guys are not being transparent. You're not being completely honest with everything that's going on for the most part. Some of you are, but a lot of you are not. But anyway, um, um, get your news from somebody that is reliable, that actually knows, that understands all of this, not just one little piece, not somebody that just cherry picks, not somebody that's just looking for their own, looking out for their best interest. That's where I stand with that, is looking out and getting all the information out there. Excuse me. One of the things I did notice is that I did want to kind of talk about this because of this platform, AHA Real Estate Exam Prep. One of the concerns has been from many of my listeners that they are going to be starting in this industry and they're concerned. I want to address this to you specifically right now, that for new agents, this is actually not bad for you at all. The reason is that you are not the old dog having to learn new tricks. Agents like me, well, maybe not like me, but agents that are out there that have been doing this for a while, they're going to have to learn some new processes. They're going to have to learn a little bit more about disclosure and what the contract changes are and all this. Being a new agent, you don't know anything yet. With no disrespect, you haven't been through the process yet. So you don't understand, limited agency. You don't know about dual agency yet. You don't know about, what sub agency used to be. You don't understand some of that thing, which is fine. You're going to be trained as you go through it. Fortunately, you're starting out on the ground level. So you're going to start out from here. So it's going to be a little bit easier for you to process that. So that'll actually work out to your advantage in that way. Other than that, I just wanted to say that again, I've mentioned a couple of times. Once this becomes more clear, once more of this has been put out there, I will have another episode, maybe even two. Once we see the actual language, once we see the final settlement, has it been changed? Is it the same? What language has been changed, and all that? What the new rules will completely encompass? I will have another episode. Hopefully, not quite as long as this one, but I will have another episode that kind of goes through that. So be listening for that, and hopefully be able to get that out to you again as soon as it becomes available. All right, guys, that is it for me today. I hope this was helpful for you. I know it was long-winded, but I wanted to go through all the pieces. I wanted you to know all the elements of this, not just the cherry pick things. I want you to be fully informed of what's going on here and all the things that go into a transaction, how it works, and all that. So I kind of give you the big pieces of it. There'll be more that comes out. That's it for me today, guys. Thank you for listening. Take care and have a legendary day.